So, Asha, are the courts doing a good job of pushing back against Trump?
Eh, it's complicated. I'm Asha Rangappa. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal and national security analyst.
And I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down into a soundbite or a skeet. So we have Presidential Potpourri this week. I enjoy our Potpourri weeks.
Yeah, because we get to talk about more stuff. Instead of getting so into the weeds, I feel like some people enjoy it, and you can give us your feedback. Please leave it in the comments. If you think that we get too much in the weeds or not enough, let us know. But there's a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, we saved the Potpourri, I think, for when there's been a lot happening, and also it might change, right? I mean, there's
Right.
like kind of thing, and Trump proclamations, and it's not really clear like where necessarily it's going to go legally. It's not like a Supreme Court case, or something like that. So I think it's better to give people an overview, especially because it's just like it's information overload. So we can start with a flashback to season 1. You might recall, Renato, that in the first week of Trump's presidency, on a Friday night, he issued his first executive order. Do you remember what that was? And it wreaked havoc across the country.
That was Travel Ban 1, right?
That was Travel Ban 1.0. And that was the complete and total shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, which Trump had promised. If you remember, he ordered all the airports to shut down, and it was craziness. And there's a great story of, the Yale Law School clinic, like rushing to the air, or, getting an injunction and rushing to the airport and basically like telling the air traffic controllers that they can't, take people back, like they have to let them stay. Anyway, so that travel ban went through a lot of litigation in different venues, but the one that eventually reached the Supreme Court was Trump versus Hawaii, or Hawaii versus Trump, which became Trump versus Hawaii when it got appealed to the Supreme Court. And by that point, the travel ban had undergone 3 iterations where they sort of changed the countries to disguise that it was really targeting Muslims, basically. But what Trump was relying on in issuing the travel ban was, once again, as we see in so many other contexts, a delegated authority in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which allows him to exclude certain people from entering the country if, for national security reasons.
That's right. And just to be clear, you mentioned delegated authority from Congress. It's important because, of course, Congress could always take that authority back if it wanted to. But the problem is, of course, that requires both houses of Congress to pass the law, and it has to be signed into law by the president. And Trump's not going to do that. So, Trump knows that not only will the Democrats not going to get 60 votes in the Senate anytime soon, but there's no way they're going to get the 2/3 needed to override his veto. So for all practical purposes, something that gives a blank check to Trump based on the authority he has now is effectively a blank check for the rest of his presidency.
Yeah, and I think there's also a practical reason. I mean, I think it's a question of whether should Congress actually claw back the delegated authority, or should we just put people in the Oval Office who can exercise that delegated authority more responsibly and, with the collective interests of the United States in mind? Because, Renato, you can imagine that there might be times when, for example, immediately after 9/11, right? You might want the president to say, if you suddenly realize countries are, there's been a massive terrorist who snuck in from a particular country to which, he didn't actually do, Bush didn't do anything to Saudi Arabia, I don't think, at that time. But let's imagine that you want the president to maybe be able to do something like that really quickly in the event of some sort of attack, right? Because at that moment, Congress may not be able to meet to, take preventative measures or something like that. So oftentimes the delegated authority allows the president to act when there is some kind of emergency or when there's some like national security reason that requires, requires a sort of a targeted, quick and surgical response to some sort of threat. I think what we're seeing, though, is that Trump is utilizing these as loopholes to basically enact larger policy changes that go beyond what Congress intended in kind of creating those specific authorities. So, that case went up to the Supreme Court. The travel ban, I think at that point it was travel ban 3.0. And it was challenged on equal protection grounds. And the people challenging it said, hey, look, this travel ban is just basically religious animus that's disguised as, exercising national security interest. And they pointed to all these tweets and Trump speeches. But basically, the court said, we're really not going to look behind the veil. Like there's nothing. In other words, they didn't evaluate it as an equal protection claim, which would have required them to give it much more careful scrutiny, as we call it in the legal world. They just analyzed whether there was a rational basis between what the government said it was trying to do, which was to improve vetting procedures for people coming from these countries, and the way that they had done it by targeting specific countries. And the court said, yes, that's fine.
Yeah, and that was a key piece of that decision that was so important, such a blow at the time, was that essentially they were, like you said, not looking behind the curtain, not piercing the veil. So as long as you had something that facially, on its face, seemed like it was justified and fulfilled not only constitutional requirements, but the requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act, et cetera, that's good enough. And it doesn't matter what the actual motive was. And in so many other contexts, of course, that would never fly, right? And we have all sorts of facially neutral laws that have been applied, let's say, based on race or something like that. Hey, you need a permit to march, but yet your permit happens to be denied because you're Martin Luther King or something along those lines. You're based on the basis of race. Those often motive really matters. And here, given the allegation was religious animus, and the fact that travel ban 1.0, I think, explicitly targeted religion, as we discussed. They had a lot to work with.
Yeah. And, they were learning from when the courts were pushing back. So the third travel ban, by the time it got to the third iteration, I have the list of countries that it had. It was Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. All of which arguably, have national security concerns in terms of, just a general threat assessment. But you can see that they kind of, they're not all Muslim countries, for example. This travel ban, let me pull up the list of countries.
It's all over the place. You got everything.
It's all over the place. Yeah. So this, let's see, Chad, Sudan, Libya, Eritrea, Yemen, Somalia, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Iran, Equatorial Guinea, and Congo, Republic of Congo. And then there's a few countries that are, I guess, they have restricted entry, and that's Turkmenistan, Laos, Sierra Leone, and Togo, and Cuba, and Haiti, and Venezuela.
Yeah, there's a lot of countries on this list.
There's a lot of countries. Yeah.
But another thing that's on in this executive order, in addition to all that list, the long list of countries and more, that are targeted by this are explicit factual findings of sorts for each country. Like Sudan lacks a cooperative central authority. The visa overstay rate is, in that case, 26.3%, and so on and so forth. So there's various facts and assertions in this that are meant to satisfy the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act and facially justify Trump's policy.
Yeah. And, honestly, compared to some of the other things that the administration is doing, the fact that there's actual factual findings is sort of shocking. But again, I guess they now, because they have the Supreme Court case from the first administration, they kind of know the bar that they need to meet, and that they're pretty much free and clear after that. So, by the by, speaking of travel restrictions, Trump also issued a proclamation. Let's see. He issued a proclamation that restricts students. Let me get the wording here. To suspend international visas for new students at Harvard University. So this is he's escalating the whole. So we talked before about how they had tried to restrict Harvard's access to the student exchange and visitor program system, which would allow them to basically, provide the documents that the students need. Now they're basically saying on the other side, students who basically have their admission letter to Harvard and, their financial aid packet or whatever, if they go into a consulate and say, I'm asking for a visa to Harvard, that the Secretary of State can deny that. It's important that this is a proclamation, not an executive order. So I think this is just him kind of proclaiming. And he's basically stating out loud what is going to be their internal policy.
That's right. And it's interesting, though. I mean, what it really shows, just from a broader perspective, is, what Trump is doing is basically putting a line in the sand that this is what you do when you fight. We've talked in prior episodes, Asha, about how Harvard's fighting. They've hired these lawyers. They're going to battle against Trump. And this is basically Trump trying to show all these other universities and others, law firms and so forth, that might challenge him. I will not quit. I'm the sort of person that if you're either with me or against me, and if Harvard's against him, he's going to keep piling on until Harvard, cries uncle.
Yeah. And he's also directing the Secretary of State to consider revoking the student visas for students that are already at Harvard. And this is sort of where the fact-finding piece comes in, because the claim by the White House is that these measures are necessary for national security reasons. Again, the same basis that he's using for the travel ban. And he's accusing Harvard of having foreign ties and radicalism, and basically saying that this is a national security threat. But there's no fact finding. It's not clear what he's basing that on. It's just sort of conclusory. But I think in the case of the visas, I mean, it's an executive function that's there. But he's basically using the levers of power that he can use. I think there's already an injunction in place against the restriction against Harvard for using the student exchange visa program system. There's also an injunction in place against the cutting of the funding. I would imagine a judge is going to put in place an injunction against this as well. But again, that doesn't mean anything for the long term, as we've talked about before, for the students who are affected.
That's right. I mean, I think you can put this proclamation right next to the executive order we just talked about a minute ago on the immigration travel ban, whatever it is at this point. It says we're beyond 2.0, it's like whatever, 4 or 5.0. And there's some interesting contrast, right? This proclamation doesn't contain any real factual anything. There's no factual findings here. There's bald assertions about crime rates increasing at Harvard. They're not punishing certain crime at Harvard. I mean, it's sort of like, well, we want to go after crime in America, so we're going to target nerdy college students at Ivy League universities, right? I mean, no one seriously thinks that foreign exchange students at Harvard are like the primary law enforcement threat to security in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? I mean, it's absurd on its face.
It also seems weird to me that, I mean, it's not weird because I think the point, Trump likes the spectacle and he likes to make a show of his power, right? Like his proclamations are, I can do this. I can now up the ante one more time doing this. But don't you think that kind of making it so transparent and putting it in writing only helps Harvard's legal case? That they're
It
being targeted as retaliation, like, for exercising their free speech. I mean, you can imagine, maybe not, well, you can imagine them doing all of these things quietly. Do you know what I'm saying? And
right.
it would almost be like harder. Like, let's say just one by one, students admitted to Harvard were just like their visas were denied. And then Harvard's like scrambling to figure out what's going on and whether this is happening at other schools. Like, in other words, there is a way in which, although it's obviously, targeted, the fact that it's targeted, I think kind of helps Harvard make its case.
I agree with that. I mean, I think the contrast, like, I when I was talking a moment ago, that the contrast with the travel ban we were just talking about is striking, because the travel ban we talked about, as you mentioned, Asha, was crafted with the Supreme Court's ruling in mind. It went out of its way to comply with a prior Supreme Court precedent that, as you put it, I think gave them essentially, it's like a playbook of what they needed to do to get a past constitutional muster. Whereas here, it's like they know that this is so obviously unlawful. They know they're going to go to court. They know they're going to get shut down. And so it's just like slapping something that makes them feel good. It's like when you write it's like you write an email and you don't send it because it's just like it makes you feel good to get it out there, but it's not gonna be helpful to press send. That's sort of what this proclamation is. But he pressed send.
Yeah. And the other piece that is a good contrast with the Harvard proclamation and the travel ban also, I think, has all of these caveats to avoid any standing for litigation. Like, if it's necessary for some, business or state interest, then these people from these countries can come, or, they're distinguishing. In other words, there was the fact that the travel ban initially in the first Trump administration was just this blanket ban, and it hurt so many state interests, which is what gave Hawaii standing to bring it. They've kind of done these little carve outs so as to avoid that situation. So I don't even know if the travel ban is going to be litigated this time. But yeah, now Harvard just has more fodder, even for its existing cases, that this is just, at this point, just harassment.
Yeah, I don't know where this ends with Trump and Harvard. We keep talking about it because he keeps doing more. I know he recently, of course, this week went after Columbia as well. So he's expanding his
though
reach.
They complied. It never pays to comply.
No, I hear you on that. Although so far Yale flying under the radar. Sorry. Fingers crossed, right? But the point being is Trump's escalating this. I don't see a legal end game for Trump there, but it's maybe making him feel good.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Venezuelans who were sent to CICOT, the El Salvadoran gulag, there was a decision in that case by Judge Boasberg because there was a new suit filed on behalf of the people who had already been sent, the Venezuelans who had already been sent to El Salvador. bringing a habeas claim in the District of Columbia under the same judge that had initially, told the Trump administration to turn the planes around, and they didn't. And so there was like this whole contempt hearing as well based on that. And this is an interesting opinion, and we don't need to go too much into the weeds because it's obviously going to get appealed. But basically, it looks like Judge Boasberg is accepting the Trump administration's argument that they do not have constructive custody of the people that are there. In other words, if the government has constructive custody, then you can essentially command them to, produce the people or file the habeas claim that they, have to be able to answer for the reasons of the detention. So he rejects that argument, but brings kind of the same, allows the plaintiffs to proceed just under constitutional due process, that their due process rights were violated when they were essentially deported without any notice or opportunity to be heard. So it's kind of an interesting distinction between habeas, which is about process, about having a chance to, challenge your detention. But he's kind of splitting some hairs here so that he doesn't, I think because he doesn't want to go down the road of like whether the government is actually the jailer or whether El Salvador is the jailer. And that gets into all kinds of diplomatic issues, whereas due process is really just the individual right that belongs to the plaintiffs. It doesn't have anything to do with, how much control the government has over the detained person.
The issue, of course, is that he's essentially ordering the executive branch to facilitate the return of these individuals to the physical custody of the United States. That's going to be, as you said, there's going to be an appeal. That's going to be hotly contested, whether he has the power to do that and what that looks like, I would think. There'll at least be some discussion of that. Obviously, that had been the subject of a prior order that already went up to the Supreme Court. But I'm sure the White House is going to once again challenge that. I just, wonder as well, like to the extent to which the judge is not issuing a sweeping decision, it just gives less. There's more of a chance of 5 votes in the Supreme Court finding a way to get Trump to where he wants to go. For what it's worth,
yeah.
That's sort of my reaction.
Yes. And then, I don't know if we talked about the tariffs, but that's also ongoing litigation about whether he's exceeded his authority under the delegated authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
Well, and it's worth noting that some conservatives are the ones litigating against him on that point.
Yeah. And that one, the Court of International Trade and a district court ruled against Trump, but the tariffs remained in place. And I think that until there's, a further hearing or litigation on that front. But he's being challenged on that. So yet another area where, Congress wants to not be able to give the president some flexibility to use economic levers in the case of a national emergency, which Trump is using in a much broader scope than what was intended.
Well, you don't think, Asha, that Harvard students themselves constitute an international emergency or foreign policy, or foreign threat to the United States? I mean, we're dealing with such grave and unexpected challenges to our national security that, of course, we need everything from tariffs to proclamations and executive orders to protect us.
Yes.
And so lest we forget, Asha, in many ways, the most important news of this week has been that the bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump has finally come to its inevitable end. I mean, we always knew this is like when you have a guest like a special guest, where you've got like this, like Tom Selleck's appearing on Friends. He's not going to be there every episode. He's not going to you have a recurring role past a maybe a few episodes in one season. So there's going to have to be some end to it. And Elon Musk, the supposedly the richest man in the world, is no longer best friends with Donald Trump. And he's on his own social media platform calling for Trump's impeachment, attacking Trump's tax and spend policies, essentially suggesting that Trump is a danger to the Constitution.
Yeah, this kind of ties in to what we talked about in the first segment about kind of needing to air it all out and get it all out. Which, in the context of immigration and Harvard, he's doing through these, proclamations and stuff. But in this case, he's doing on his Truth Social platform. It escalated quickly, I will say. But before we get into the escalation, I think I am not so sure that it has come to an end, a full conclusion end.
Oh, I think you think we'll have a redemption in a week? A redemption?
I feel like they might kiss and make up. Don't you think?
Well,
he has these spats every now and then. I mean, I think it really depends on how much of a narcissistic injury Musk's comments have caused. So among the things that Musk has said is that Trump wouldn't have won without his help.
Possibly true. Possibly true.
He's kind of suggested that he's more important than Trump because he's like, Trump's only going to be president for 3.5 more years. I'll be around for the next 40. He has accused Trump of being a part of the Epstein files and says that that's why the Epstein files were not released. What else escalated? I need to look at my Blue Sky account, actually.
Well, I think I told you.
I was retweeting all of these because they were hilarious.
Well, I mean, like I said, he did obviously, he's really kind of in many ways kicked into high gear when he was attacking Trump's budget, right? And blasting that. He's called for his impeachment. I mean, that was interesting.
Wait, he called for his impeachment?
Yeah. Well, what happened was somebody else on X called for his impeachment, and he appeared to agree or appeared to approve.
Oh, this must have happened after I stepped away from Blue Sky. This is not a good time to step away. So Elon Musk also tweeted, "Is it time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle?" So yeah, it's and then Trump, of course, has suggested that Elon has Trump derangement syndrome. He has threatened to cancel all his contracts and subsidies.
Biden should have done it, he said, by the way.
Biden should have done it. I mean, I don't know whose side are you on this?
Oh, I'm on America's side. I'm on neither of those gentlemen's side.
No, but if one of them, like, I wouldn't mind Elon Musk going down.
I mean, okay.
I mean, if he ended up on a plane to Seacot, I wouldn't be crying.
I believe everyone deserves due process and rights.
Okay, he deserves due process too. Fine, but I'm just saying. Okay, then I wouldn't be sad if all of his government contracts were canceled.
Okay. Well, I will just say.
I don't know. I feel like, I do like. Here's what bothers me, and here's why I think Elon deserves what's coming to him, because in many ways, whatever Trump is doing, and trust me, he is acting. He is definitely pushing the boundaries of and acting outside of the scope of his executive authority, and this is why the courts are pushing back. But there is a system in place to that both can address what he's doing. So, as we see in this court litigation, that could theoretically hold him accountable. So that's Congress. what bothered me about Musk, and it just caused me so much anxiety, is that he was just acting. He's a complete extra constitutional player. Like there actually, I still don't know what his role was, and he decimated so many things, and just was just so destructive. And harmed so many people. I mean, I don't know what the number is. Isn't it like 300,000 people now, like, are like kids or something, are going to die because of what he did to USAID? I don't know. If he disappeared completely from the political scene, I would not be sad. And if his career and fortunes were ruined for the rest of his life, I would not be sad.
But yet, you predict that there will be a rapprochement,
A rapprochement.
sort of détente between these two gentlemen. I don't see it because I feel like their egos are such that, and they've been insulted, so wounded so gravely, that Elon will go back into his bubble and Trump will go back into his. And
Elon has more to lose. I mean, because Trump could really reinstate all of those investigations into Elon's companies.
That's true, he could. And I will note that there are 31 billion reasons why Elon might be interested in getting back on Trump's good side, because his net worth literally plummeted. So much of his recent gains in his net worth have been because of his perceived closeness to Trump. But at the same time, Elon Musk doesn't seem like the sort of person who wants to have a slight to his male ego.
That's true. I don't know. I will be surprised if this actually lasts, but if it does, I'm here for it. I've got my wine and fries.
We'll see. So Asha, before we go, you are all dressed up. Where are you going?
I am all dressed up, and I got my hair cut. That was something that's happening anyway. But today happens to be my daughter's 16th birthday.
Wow, that's a big one.
We're going out to dinner. So yeah, cool. I had to dress up before we recorded because we're heading out as soon as we're done recording. And yeah, it's very exciting. Did you? Well, I don't think that guys do big things for the 16th birthday.
Not at all. Not at all. I don't remember, first of all, my own 16th. That's like not a thing. Like that's like that's just like another birthday for a guy.
Yeah.
And
I had a big sweet 16 party.
You were like super Miss Popular. Weren't you like the Kelly Kapowski of your high school?
Who's Kelly Kapowski?
From Saved by the Bell. You ever watch that show?
I know. I'm vaguely. Which one was she?
She's like the popular cheerleader one.
Okay. I mean, I was a cheerleader.
So that's hence the reference, Asha.
Yes.
Hence the reference.
Actually, my Sweet 16 party was the night that, of course, I couldn't have predicted this, but our basketball team went to the state championship.
Oh, and
I know,
there you go.
And I had to miss it. So, but
Wow.
all the cheerleaders came. Yeah. I had a big party, so I was very excited. I thought my daughter might want to do a big party. Did not want a big party. I guess that's not a thing anymore. She's telling me she didn't know what to do. So she's going to do a picnic.
Picnic? That's cool.
With her friends. And then tonight we're going to go out to dinner. I'm glad that I noticed that she was there because I was going to reveal on the pod what I got her, but I'm not going to do that now. So it does not ruin the surprise because she's obviously listening.
Well, that's a big secret. Where are you going for dinner? What kind of food?
So we're going in downtown New Haven. We're going to an Italian restaurant that was not there when we were in law school called Villa Lulu. It's quite good. I do enjoy it.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, I approve of the food choice, and I can't wait to hear what the gift is.
Awesome. I'll reveal it next week.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.